Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder if feeling lonely might actually change the way you think about your responsibilities to others, or even your desire to get better at things? It's a big question, and a recent study dove deep into it. So imagine a group of researchers looked at young people, teenagers really, and they wanted to see if being lonely somehow made them care less about the group or less about improving themselves. They used this fancy method called cross-lagged panel models, which sounds complicated, but it's basically a way to look at how two things might influence each other over time. They found that loneliness seemed to predict a drop in both collective responsibility and self-improvement values. It sounded like loneliness was directly chipping away at these important aspects of a person. Pretty serious stuff, right? But then some other researchers, Kimmo Sorjonen and his colleagues, took a closer look. They said, hold on a minute. Sometimes these fancy statistical models can show a connection even when there isn't a real one. Think of it like this. If two friends always show up to school wearing the same color shirt, you might think one is copying the other. But maybe they both just grabbed the same color shirt from their closet because it was the only clean one. A common reason, not a direct influence. Sorjonen's team pointed out that these cross-lagged findings could be just statistical quirks, not actual cause and effect. They decided to reanalyze the data, but in a slightly different way. They couldn't get the original data, so they created a simulated version that matched the original study's details. This is a clever trick because if the statistical relationships are the same, then reanalyzing the simulated data should give them similar results to what the original researchers got. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. They tried 3 different ways of looking at the data. In the first way, which was similar to the original study, they found loneliness seemed to be linked to a decrease in those values, just like the first study. But when they tried a slightly different statistical approach, controlling for the later outcome instead of the earlier one, the effect flipped and loneliness seemed to predict an increase. And in the third, even simpler approach, there were no significant links at all. See how wildly different the results were just by tweaking how they looked at the data. To get a clearer picture, they then crunched all these different results together using something called a meta-analysis. This is like taking several small studies and combining their findings to see the overall trend. And guess what? When they combined everything, the effect of loneliness on these values was basically 0. It didn't matter if it looked negative, positive, or null in the individual analysis. This doesn't mean the original study was wrong or unethical. It just means that the way they analyzed the data might have led to a conclusion that wasn't as strong as it first appeared. The connection they saw could be due to statistical tricks rather than a genuine, predictable influence of loneliness. Sorjonen's team recommends we be really careful about jumping to big conclusions from these kinds of longitudinal studies, unless we see similar results across many different ways of looking at the data. They even proposed a model called the Spurious Perspective Associations model, or SPAM for short. It suggests that sometimes what looks like one thing influencing another over time is actually just because both things are influenced by something else common, like your general personality or background traits. In this SPAM model, everything fit together really well without needing any direct links between loneliness and those values. It is like saying maybe people who are generally feeling a bit down or less positive might experience loneliness and also have lower collective responsibility and self-improvement values, but one doesn't necessarily cause the other. So, what's the big takeaway here? It's about being a critical consumer of research, especially when it comes to complex things like human behavior over time. The researchers who reanalyze the data are saying don't just believe the first significant result you see. Science is often about looking at things from all angles. The original researchers saw a link, and that is important. It sparked a question, but then further investigation showed that link might not be as straightforward as it seemed. It is a great example of how science builds on itself, with different researchers questioning, testing, and refining our understanding. This whole process highlights the importance of what is called analytic rigor. It means being super careful about how you analyze your data. The takeaway for us is that when you hear about a study linking one thing to another, especially over time, ask yourself, did they try different ways of looking at the numbers? Did they rule out other explanations? It's not that loneliness doesn't have effects, it absolutely does, but this specific finding, this direct negative impact on collective responsibility and self-improvement values, might be one of those cases where the statistical model showed something that looked real but wasn't. The authors themselves are careful to say this doesn't prove there is no effect. It just means this particular study, and this specific analysis didn't provide solid proof. It is more like a we can't be sure situation. And this is why researchers make their data and analysis code available, like the Sorjonen team did at OSF IOPXBP. It allows others to check their work and explore different interpretations. It is about transparency and collaboration in science. So, in the end, what does this mean for you and me? It means we should be mindful of our own loneliness and how it might affect us, but perhaps not worry that it is automatically diminishing our sense of responsibility or our drive to grow. It's a complex dance, and sometimes the connections we think we see are more about how we're looking at them. What I really like about this story is how it showcases the scientific process. One study comes up with a finding. Another group digs deeper, questions it, and uses different tools to see if the finding holds up. It is not about proving someone wrong, but about getting closer to the truth. It reminds us that science is an ongoing conversation, not a final verdict. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think feeling lonely affects how you see your responsibilities? Let me know in the comments below, and if you found this breakdown helpful, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more explorations into the fascinating world of psychology. We'll see you next time.